3 months ago, my family and I embarked on an exciting adventure as we headed to St. Petersburg. The 20-hour road trip from Milwaukee to St. Pete was a bit of a trek. Traveling in 2 cars with a toddler and 2 babies presented its challenges. Crying, traffic, rain, a faulty engine light. Late one stormy night, as we arrived at a hotel in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, we learned that the power was out in the entire area, including our hotel. Computer system down. It'll be at least a few hours before we can check you in, the staff members informed us. We sat in the lobby waiting for the power to come back, waiting for our children to fall asleep, waiting to get to St. Pete. Just then, a couple walks past us, looks at our family, and says, "Sure got your hands full." As human beings, we often find ourselves in situations that test our patience. During difficult moments, we ask ourselves, how much longer will I have to wait for things to get better? As we celebrate Rosh Hashanah and usher in a new year of life, many of us find ourselves waiting to begin a new job, waiting for a big move, waiting to receive medical results, waiting for improved health, waiting to fall in love, waiting for a relationship to get better, waiting for a relationship to end, waiting to become parents, waiting to recover from a devastating loss, waiting as a family member's health declines. We may find ourselves waiting to get in shape, to receive a promotion, to make new friends, to finish school. We may be waiting for a just society, an end to discrimination. Collectively, we are waiting for the end of the COVID-19 pandemic. We are waiting to socialize with loved ones without any worries or restrictions. We are waiting for an opportunity to enjoy our favorite activities without fear of COVID and the Delta variant. We are waiting for normalcy, for healing, for peace. Stuck in this place, it seems as though life is paused. But life does not pause. Life continues. While yearning to fast forward to the next chapter, while yearning for an end to this pandemic, we may lose sight of life's blessings. Our goal is to live meaningful lives even while we wait. Last night, we spoke about coping with the sadness of time passing. We reflected on the fact that time is fleeting, and as much as we sometimes want to stop time and hold on to a moment forever, we must move forward, ready to experience the next chapter. Well, for many of us who feel stuck, all we want to do is move forward. All we want to do is skip ahead to an easier, more enjoyable time. For many of us, waiting for the next chapter may be painful and exhausting. Our ancestors won the Olympic gold medal in waiting as they wandered through the wilderness for 40 years, marching toward the promised land. Sure, they lost their patience once or twice. Anger and frustration brewed inside of them, and they rebelled. They cried, they bickered, they lost hope. And at the same time, They continued marching forward as they waited to reach the promised land. It was during the Israelites waiting in the wilderness that they received Torah. This tree of life, this most precious gift, was not received in the promised land itself. The Israelites received Torah in the wilderness. Far from home, far from comfort or stability, the Israelites were filled with uncertainty. In this state, they transformed as a holy community. With hope in their hearts, they received the wisdom and the spirit of the Torah. As we wait on our dreams to become reality, as we continue navigating this pandemic, we search for gems of wisdom and spirit that may bring us comfort. The Israelites' journey through the wilderness teaches us valuable lessons that may help us as we wait to reach our own promised land. One lesson we learn from our ancestors' wilderness journey is the value of asking for help. As the Israelites waited to enter the promised land, they held each other's hands for support. Even our greatest leader, Moses, realized how desperately he needed the help of others. While leading the Israelites, Moses became overwhelmed and exhausted. Jethro, his father-in-law, encouraged him to set up a hierarchy of people who could help him. Listening to Jethro, Moses set up a group of community leaders. What a relief it was for Moses to create this support system. Echoing the lesson Moses learned, there's an old story about a father and son who lived in the country. The man was a merchant and he sold a little of this and a little of that. Once a month, he'd get his horse and wagon and head off to other towns. The man would always bring his son along with him. The only road out of the valley wound up around the tallest mountain. The man and his son began their journey. It was almost noon when they came to the top of the mountain. The sun stood high overhead, and then they came around the last bend. All of a sudden, the horse stopped. The father and son looked ahead and saw in front of them a tremendous pile of rocks in the middle of the road. The boy said, "Don't worry, Father. I'll get rid of the rocks and clear the path." He pushed the rocks, he pulled the rocks, he rolled some off the cliff. All the rocks were gone except for one. It was just too heavy for him to move. Walking back to the wagon, wiping his arm across his forehead, he looked up and said, "I'm so sorry, Father, but I can't move the last rock and we can't get around it." The father asked, "Have you done everything you could?" Surprised by the question, the boy thought for a minute. The boy grabbed a cloth, wrapped it around the rock, and tried to pull it by yanking the cloth, but still the rock wouldn't move. "I'm so sorry, Father. It's just no use. We'll have to turn around." The father said once more, "Are you sure you've done everything you could?" The boy got angry this time. "Yes, Father. I've been pushing and pulling and rolling and throwing rocks for 2 hours. I've used even this cloth. I've really done everything I could." His father shook his head. "No, you haven't, because you haven't asked me for help." With that, he climbed down from the wagon, and the father and son worked together to roll the rock over the cliff. Within minutes, the father and son were on their way. Many of us relate to the young boy in this story as we too struggle with asking for help when we need it. Especially as we have waded through this pandemic, some of us have become anxious, depressed, and lonely. Some have struggled financially. Some have become overwhelmed balancing life's many challenges. We all have moments when asking for help is necessary. Sometimes we struggle to ask for help because we worry that others will perceive us as being a burden. We continue struggling on our own rather than admitting that we need help. Even Moses, our greatest teacher, needed help as he wandered through the wilderness. Just as Moses needed support, and just as the son needed his father's help removing the rock, we too may need help while waiting to reach our promised land. May we find the courage to ask for help, allowing others to keep us company while we wait. A second lesson we learn from our ancestors' wilderness journey is the importance of maintaining hope. As the Israelites prepared to enter the promised land, Moses sent Israelite spies to investigate the land and observe its inhabitants. After visiting the land, the spies came crawling back, feeling defeated and discouraged. They said to Moses, "We came to the land you sent us to, and it does flow with milk and honey. But the people who inhabit the country are powerful, and the cities are so large. We can't attack the people. All the people are of great size. We looked like little grasshoppers to ourselves and to them." Feeling hopeless, the Israelite spies thought about giving up and returning to Egypt. 2 Israelites, Caleb and Joshua, remained hopeful. They demonstrated optimism and positivity as they continued believing in the team. In response to the other spies' doubts, Caleb said, "We can surely go up and take possession of this land, for we can indeed overcome it." Then Caleb and Joshua both spoke to the entire congregation and said, "The land we passed through is an exceedingly good land. If God desires, God will bring us to this land and give it to us, a land flowing with milk and honey." Caleb and Joshua became inspiring leaders of the Jewish people as they dared to share their hopes and their positivity with the people. When we find ourselves waiting for change, it may be difficult for us to find hope. Even through struggle, tradition teaches us to look for the light in darkness, to find that glimmer of hope. There is a plant called the Queen of the Night. It's a cactus, and its flower blooms only in the darkness of night. Imagine that, a beautiful flower that only blooms in darkness. Throughout life's struggles, we search for the beauty and the goodness that happens to bloom in our darkest days. During the pandemic, we express gratitude for the blessings we have appreciated, the improvements in technology, the camaraderie and support of community, the creative and innovative ways people have remained connected. Just as Caleb and Joshua remained hopeful and optimistic through their time in the wilderness, we pray that we too will be hopeful and optimistic in our wandering. A third lesson we learn from our ancestors during their wilderness journey is the importance of faith. Despite the difficulties the Israelites faced, they believed God's presence remained with them. Torah tells us, "By day, God went ahead of them, and in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night, in a pillar of fire to give them light." the Israelites believed that no matter what time of day, God's presence surrounded them. When our ancestors created the Mishkan, their portable sanctuary, God told them, "Make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among you." God dwells among us. When we are in search of faith, when we feel depleted and stressed and alone, we pray that we may feel the presence of the divine in our connections with one another. One of our prayers, Ritzeh, teaches us that God is always on call. When we feel lost, God's pager is always on, as though waiting for us to call. We pray the words, El Karov Lechol Korav, God is near to all who call. Our ancestors certainly called out to God throughout their wandering. When the Israelites were crossing the sea and escaping Egyptian slavery, they sang out to God in joy. When the Israelites were hungry and exhausted, they cried out to God in despair. Through prayer, the Israelites released their emotions in a healthy way. Hit Bodadut is a form of prayer where we call out to God and confess our deepest feelings. In this form of prayer, we may wrap ourselves in a talit or go to a private place of our own and call out to God. We tell God everything on our mind as if the divine is our best friend, listening to every detail and providing support. Personal prayer is one way faith may help ease the pain of waiting. As we reflect on our ancestors' journey through the wilderness, we learn a plethora of lessons that may help us on our own journey. May the experience of our ancestors teach us the value of asking for help, the importance of maintaining hope, and the value of faith. Looking back at my family's chaotic road trip to St. Pete, I am relieved that we are no longer waiting in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, in a hotel lobby with a power outage. My family cannot thank the Temple Beth-El community enough for welcoming us and making us feel so at home here in the promised land of St. Pete. We are thankful to be part of a community that weathers life's storms together, a community of passionate, kind individuals that continue to support one another as we wait for this pandemic to end. In one way or another, we are all waiting. May we find comfort in waiting together. This Rosh Hashanah, may the sound of the shofar stir us toward being alert to the unique blessings of the wilderness. During these challenging times, we do not know our ETA, our estimated time of arrival at our destination. We may be waiting longer than we had hoped. Let's keep each other company as we continue waiting and living, appreciating life's goodness, marching together toward the promised land. Shana Tova.